After like maybe 4 or 5 years, something happened. It's like more and more, I felt that the unbalance between my professional and my personal life was not good. You know, I was working probably like 60 to 70 hours a week, most of the weeks. I was taking 1 week of holidays every year. I didn't care when I started, but after a while, I was like, hey, is it the life I really want for the rest of my life? It feels like a bit heavy, you know? There's so many things to explore in this life, right? Than work. And then that's when I realized that this company I created to be free was actually a jail I created for myself because I couldn't see how to really lower the time I was putting in the business because I didn't know how to. I had some employees already, but I didn't know how to delegate well. I was the main provider of value, and I felt that if I would lower my time in the business, it would tank. I couldn't see how to sell the business. It was my only source of income, so I couldn't stop it. I was like, I felt trapped. You know, I felt trapped. I tried to explore some solution. I took some courses, but nothing really worked until a few years later, I read a book that completely changed my life. And this book is The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And I read this book in like 1 weekend, and it completely changed the way I was seeing my business and my job as an entrepreneur. Because basically in the book, Tim Ferriss explained how to have a business that is in service of your life and how to not waste your life, you know, having a business. Many entrepreneurs work too much. And one of the books Tim Ferriss recommends at the end of his one is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And I read it like maybe 2 weeks later. And already my face was red here because I took a slap from the 4-Hour Work Week, you know. And then the E-Myth was another slap, you know. So my face was all red because when I read the E-Myth, I mean, Michael Gerber was explaining exactly why I was working too much in my business. And I was like, what? How is it possible? Like, I thought, I mean, I was conscious of the problem, but I thought I was alone, you know? That I was the only miserable entrepreneur in the world, right? Which is so stupid when you think about it. But anyway. And then I realized that actually not only I'm not alone, but it's a very common problem. And there are solutions. And I'm like, wow. Okay, so first, now I know what I want. I want an internet business because I want the geographic freedom that Tim Ferriss talks about in the 4-Hour Work Week. And wow, I read 2 books in 2 weeks that makes me completely change my point of view about my job, which I have been doing for 8 years. Okay, maybe I should read more books, you know? And I mean, I realized it was the biggest mistake I did in my life. I really love reading. I was reading all the time, but I was reading only fiction books. It took me 8 years to figure out that there were good practical books that I could read to be better at what I was doing. Again, the retrospective is so stupid, but I mean, I did a very stupid mistake. Then everything connected, you know. I was like, okay, I want to start an internet business. I did this stupid mistake. And I was like, if I did this stupid mistake, probably I'm not the only one to do this mistake. So maybe I should create a blog about great business books and how you can use them to be a better entrepreneur. And that's how I got the idea to start on the internet.
So Olivier, you were learning a lot, but I would argue, and you might as well, that the most important lesson of that first business that you had this amazing lesson that from Tim Ferriss in the 4-Hour Work Week, that you could create a business and it could be online. It didn't have to control your life. And then from Michael Gerber with E-Myth, that you could build a business that runs without you, essentially, or that you don't need to be the operator within. But maybe the biggest lesson from that first business was that there was this wisdom out there that you could get from books or courses or memberships. Would that be accurate, that was probably the biggest, most important lesson you learned?
It is. I made a whole blog about why it's important to learn, you know, what you want to do, like the knowledge needed to do what you want to achieve. Yeah, there is a teacher for everything, and it can be in the form of a real teacher or a book or a course or a workshop or whatever. Yeah, it's such a mistake if you're not actively pursuing like your teacher or some teachers in the field when you want to be good.
When you really get that, because I know for me, so you were probably mid-20s at that time, or maybe even later 20s.
I was 27, something like this.
Yeah. For me, it was 30. I was like 34 or 35 when I had that lesson. So you were quicker than me. But for me, it was when I first bought a course from Tony Robbins, and I was like, this lesson, obviously he was teaching all this great stuff, but it was also clear that he was teaching stuff he learned from others. And that changed everything in my life. And Chris, I know I think you were actually probably a lot younger when you had this experience.
I was very fortunate that I got into a sales company, an entrepreneurial company, when I was, I think, 19. And I remember the first book they ever got for me was this just book that said The Money Book, and it had $20 in it or something. It was sort of this cheesy sales thing. It's like, here's a money book. You open it and money falls out, right? But I read the book, and it was like, here's how to be rich with your money, like what to do with it. And it just was an idea of like, oh, if I read this, I'll actually, and start implementing this now, I could really set myself up for the future. And then that spiraled into like, Dale Carnegie books and other, sales books basically along the way. And countless leadership books that wound up making an impact on me as I was growing in that company specifically. So valuable to learn. And everyone, I think, as an entrepreneur has to learn that at some point.
Yeah. And for me, it was just, and it sounds like for Olivier, it was just like such an eye opener that you just said it so well, Olivier, like whatever you want to learn, whatever you need to learn, there's someone that has spent their entire life becoming a world-class expert in that. And for the cost of a book or a course, you can get that. And I think that's what this whole podcast is about, is trying to bring you that hard wisdom. And that's my business. That's Olivier's business. If you take nothing else from this podcast, that's the secret. That is the secret.
Hey, Launch family, one more thing before you go. There's a few spots left in Jeff's Launch Intensive workshop. This is a live in-person training with Jeff, Dan, and Justin in the room. Only 40 people are going to be there. Small, intimate, and super, super powerful. If you'd like to check that out, all you have to do is go to getyouLaunched.com today. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.